Here we go again. In case you missed it, another British Columbian First Nation has just announced that they discovered 41 unmarked graves at a former residential school site by way of ground-penetrating radar, which those of you who have been watching our reports know such claims are not possible without excavation, leaving many of us who have 2 or more brain cells scratching our heads wondering why. If it's been 4 years, $250 million tax dollars, many burnt churches, and not a single body later since Kamloops and other bands have made similar claims, what could have possibly possessed the Sechelt First Nation to tell the world this?
Today we announce an additional 41 unmarked graves found, bringing our total to 81. These findings and the areas scanned were all driven by the stories and the memories of our survivors, our elders, and family members who have been carrying these truths and burdens with strengths for many, many years.
Drea Humphrey here with Rebel News, and that was a clip from the video statement of the Sechelt, aka Sechelt First Nation chief Lenora Joe, telling her community and the rest of the world that they have discovered, with the help of an archaeological team and conducting GPR surveys, another 41 unmarked graves, in addition to the 40 graves they already claimed to have discovered by the same method back in 2023.
I am the chief of the Sechelt Nation. My English name is Lenora Joe. Today is a day of loss for our community and for our families. We have received the results from the GPR team in the areas that have been scanned in the last 18 months. In 2023, we shared the results of our previous scanning on the grounds and the areas of the former St. Augustine Residential School.
Except these findings are not proven to be unmarked graves, like Chief Lenora has just said there. Instead, they are anomalies, disturbances in the soil, which at first in Kamloops, many thought were tree roots because it was an apple orchard, but compelling evidence now suggests that, in fact, it's an old septic trench. Nevertheless, that hasn't stopped Chief Lenora, an ally for the cause media, from making the same strong claim without any strong evidence. And where is the evidence for the 40 or 81 children missing from St. Augustine's anyways? Chief Lenora will tell you this.
But these numbers are not a surprise to us. We have always believed our elders. Our families in the Sechelt and First Nation communities across the country have always spoken of the children that never returned home.
Never returned home? That's strange, because according to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's own final report, there were a total of 5 St. Augustine students who sadly died while being enrolled in the school, a time when illnesses such as tuberculosis ravaged the community. But 0 missing kids were reported on that commission report. Surely their parents would have reported them missing, right? But let's give the Sechelt band's unmarked grave discovery claim the benefit of the doubt for a moment, which is about as long as my imagination can stretch away from the facts. If 40 unmarked graves were found 2 years ago and another 41 today, by now the BC coroners and RCMP, whom the band has vaguely said is involved in the investigation, well, surely by now they would have discovered something, right? They have the resources to do so. They could put shovels in the ground if they really wanted to. Wrong. I haven't heard back from the RCMP yet, but the BC coroners gave a non-committal response to my inquiry, claiming they continue to work closely with a number of First Nations partners across BC to ensure culturally appropriate processes for the disinterment, examination, and identification of human remains at residential schools and hospitals, aligned with the BC Coroners Act and the wishes of the affected family. When I pushed back a bit to try to get you guys some clarity, I wanted to know straight up, have they come across any remains or not? in the whole province, not just here. The BC Coroner Service said it does not share information on active investigations, aka nothing regarding these claims appears to be conclusive. But despite zero bodies and zero forensic confirmation being available for this site, would you believe the BC legislature rushed to lower our flag half-mast? That's right, look at here, without a peep from nearly all of the province's elected MLAs. I said nearly all. One party, the One BC party, led by MLA Dallas Brody and whose House Speaker is MLA Tara Armstrong, said this.
British Columbians deserve better. We deserve leadership that insists on truth, not speculation. We deserve accountability, not secrecy. We deserve reconciliation rooted in evidence, not in unverified claims. The NDP's decision to lower the flags in response to the Seashelt announcement was not leadership. It was political theatre. It was an attempt to look compassionate without first demanding proof. And the BC Conservatives? Silent. No push for evidence, no call for accountability, just more of the same.
You know, because it would be so politically incorrect to spread the good news to British Columbians, which is to date, not a single body has been discovered among the over 100 banned government unmarked grave claims since 2021. And that good news supporting historical evidence that Canada's residential school system was not a playground for a genocidal maniac agenda. So why is the Seashelt ban keeping the unmarked grave without excavation claim alive? That is the million-dollar question, quite literally. Is society witnessing some modern form of Munchausen syndrome where the emotional, political, and economical payoff for having their own members and fellow Canadians grieve about a nefarious unmarked grave claim that never was? Is that what matters more than truth before reconciliation? Or maybe it's just the economic component here that really is the driving force. After all, a banned government is just a group of politicians. Is it that outlandish to think that perhaps money could be a motivator here? We know that the Kamloops ban over the last 4 years has received at least $12 million to heal and also to investigate and excavate, which is the opposite of what they spent the money on. They pretty much spent the money on everything else, like handing over big contracts to their choice of publicists and consultants, which hopefully has no conflict of interests, of course. So no wonder every band and its res dog began raising its hand and saying, hey, I've got GPR and we've got some findings here. Well, it's true. Just ahead of the election, the Liberals had a change of heart and defunded some of the commitments to giving funds to committees. There are still other avenues that they can still get money. Canada's Residential School Missing Children Community Support Fund is the main one. It was created in 2021, of course, right after the Kamloops claim, and it states that it's been funding 140 bands. And while I'm certainly not saying that all 140 bands are raising unmarked and missing children claims to get some of the up to $3 million per year bands can get for doing things like conducting research, commemoration of burial sites, unmarked graves, and fieldwork investigations, identification and repatriation of remains. But is it really that odd to think that some are? And there's that word, repatriation. That's the word that I brought a lot of people's attention to during my documentary called Kamloops, The Buried Truth, which you can watch at kamloopsdocumentary.com for no charge. It's about 3 years old now. But in that, I talked about repatriation because it means the returning of actual remains to families, something that is very important to the Indigenous people. But something that doesn't seem to be so important to over 100 bands claiming that they have unmarked and missing children. There's only been a few to put the shovel in the ground, and those few have not turned up with any human remains in those unmarked graves when they do. You would think that, especially with Seashelt, it would be important to do repatriation back in 2023. Listen to the chief say this.
The children who were forced to attend St. Augustine Residential School institution are our Seashelt ancestors, and Shishalt elders and ancestors and elders from the 53 communities, most of them in BC, but some of them as far away as Saskatchewan, and the disappearance of their siblings, their cousins, their peers, in addition to their own trauma that they experienced.
I admit it must be very traumatic, especially when you have a leader who is sort of dancing around the truth, just not being completely transparent when they say, I have found, or we have found unmarked graves when they haven't yet. And all doing that in front of the world while she represents her members. A leader of that type raises a lot of questions. And to what is the possible motive? But why would they dig? If it's about economics, why dig now? I wish I could ask Chief Lenore that question, but conveniently she's not taking any interviews, so I'll have to just go ahead with this theory here. As you can see, the band received $2.6 million right around 2023, which is when they first made their claim. And what you should know is that this money doesn't come out in a lump sum. It's in installments, and you have to reapply every year. So there is an incentive in not digging right away and dragging out your field work another 18 months, it appears. Whether or not that's the motivation, again, I don't know. A politician not taking answers. But why, again, dig now? Could it be that the jig is up? Could it be that the people know what's up? Because they do. According to an Angus Reid poll that's just come out, 1/3 of Canadians are no longer convinced with these empty claims. They want to see the proof before they believe them. And by the way, over 50% of Indigenous people feel the same. So there goes your residential school denier kryptonite every time you want to go after somebody who wants transparency on this issue. But it's not actually just the people. I'm thankful it is, of course, because the truth truly is what needs to happen for any form of reconciliation. It's actually the mainstream media. I'd like to think you and myself have something to do with that, because after CBC's Rosie Barton defamed me at the debates, I don't know if you saw that, but she told the world I was spreading misinformation when I rightfully claimed that no human remains had been found in any of these unmarked grave so-called discoveries.
There's three right-wing, very right-wing media, we can call them media, websites that are present in there. They get in line to ask a question like anybody else. Their accreditation has been approved by the Commission of Debates, and so they get the right to stand in line and ask a question that they choose to ask. In this case, you saw Mr. Singh, and this has been his position for some time, to refuse to answer questions. Rebel News in particular traffics in misinformation, facts, lack of facts, and as you heard in that question, which was woven with some truth and some things that weren't true. Yes, there have been burnings of Christian Catholic churches. Yes, there have been remains of Indigenous children found in various places around the country, which she misrepresented.
And that month, her ombudsman, the CBC's, well, they came out with a report, and she said that they got the highest amount of complaints they had had. Coincidence? I think not. This measly retraction came out where Rosie had to eat her words, but many saw the truth. In fact, many, during my question at the debate to Jagmeet Singh about that, probably hadn't heard it before. But you guys were behind that. I know many of you reached out and you followed our campaign at cbclies.com. So making a difference, it seems. But take a look at how the CBC reporters are now finally pointing out what they should have 4 years ago.
The Shishalt First Nation says ground-penetrating radar has identified more potential unmarked graves.
It's important to note that ground-penetrating radar does not in itself find human remains, but detects soil disturbances inconsistent with the surrounding areas, which, combined with oral history, could point to potential grave sites.
Now, Suhara Maharchan, who's since retired from the CBC, was probably the only CBC journalist who have asked a critical question about these grave claims early on. And when she did, she's faced with the response we're still seeing from many banned governments and those pushing the narrative.
Uncovered, as you say, was it ground penetrating radar? What's the story behind it? Because there are some unanswered questions.
Well, I believe that that is the mechanism that was used to identify the unmarked graves. This is something that is going to be occurring all across Canada. I've spoken to a number of First Nation leaders who have had residential schools in their communities, and they are preparing to do the very same thing. And so what we're going to find is we're going to have a very large number of unmarked children's graves across this country, which are going to speak very loudly about the path that this country set out to destroy children, family, culture, language, traditions, and remove us from our lands, which everyone is enjoying today except First Nations.
We don't know. We don't have confirmation. You know, I'm a journalist. I want to get the facts out right. We don't know they are all children's graves, right?
Well, there, of course, there's every possibility that they are not all unmarked graves of children. Mm-hmm. But with this emerging story for media today and the realization that this is a reality across this country, I believe it's safe to assume that what we're uncovering now are a very large number of unmarked children's graves in Indian residential schools.
Safe to assume? When did Canada become a country where it's safe to assume that anomalies are children's graves? Safe to assume that it's noble to lower our flag over unproven, financially incentivized claims? Safe to assume that a rise in attack against Christian places of worship is understandable? And safe to assume that anybody who contradicts any such assumptions is a far-right racist residential school denier. Drea Humphrey with Rebel News. The Kamloops file we've been covering for 4 years is a perfect example of the importance of Rebel News bringing you the other side of the story, which we did from the start. But it really isn't over here. If you appreciate the work that we've done on this file and you want me to dig deeper, look at more of these bans and more of how the government is going along with these unproven claims, please consider donating what you can at kamloopsdocumentary.com to help fund those reports.